Over the course of BMW's incredible history, it's had quite a number of memorable milestones. And if I were to pick a couple of my own, I'd probably have to talk about that time BMW made not one but two engines in the same year with more than 100 horsepower per litre. Of course, the E36 M3 and, in 1992, the McLaren F1. If I were to pick another one, I'd probably have to go for that time BMW fitted an F1 derived V10 under the bonnet of the E60 M5. But today, I think I might be driving yet another significant milestone in the company's history. This car is mechanically similar to the iX50 that I drove earlier in the year, but it has a number of significant differences to earn its M colours. And when I say M colours, it's actually got a black M badge on the boot, but we'll come to that later. What I'm talking about is power. It has the same size battery, 111.5 kilowatt hours, but this car produces 455 kilowatts and, I can't believe I'm saying this, 1100 newton meters of torque. BMW says this car will do the dash from 0 to 100 in just 3.8 seconds, fast for a big SUV, but believe me, it feels a lot quicker. On paper, this car does a lot, including standard kit and performance. But I want to have a closer look at that exterior styling, so let's find somewhere to pull over and have a closer look. On the outside, there's not a huge amount to differentiate this, the M60, from the rest of the range, but there are a couple of things I still want to focus on, starting with that grille. It might be huge and imposing, but it actually manages to be very aerodynamic. In sports mode, when the suspension is at its lowest, this car has a coefficient of just 0.26, which is very good for battery efficiency. It rolls on 22-inch M Sport design wheels, and inside those are housed 17-inch brakes. And this particular version is presented in this lovely aventurine red colour. Reminds me a little bit of the Calypso red BMW offered years ago. Contrasting that is this excellent titanium bronze colour. It works really nicely, particularly on a car with these proportions. Frameless doors for like a coupe, but not. Now, unlike the i4, the iX rolls on a dedicated electric vehicle platform, and that means this car can go further on less. Charge times, it'll do about 10%, 80% in just 35 minutes with 195 kilowatt charging. Now, it's not the first car that's electrified from BMW to wear an M badge, but significantly it is the first version you cannot have a petrol version of. And that means it's going to be critical what it drives like. So let's find out. If you like the cabin of the 50, then you'll love this one because it's changed very little. Just some differences in the graphics to support its more M sporty background, but otherwise it's the same lovely choices of materials, quilted leather down the sides of the seats. It's a bit of a love or hate interior, but for the record, I absolutely love it. It's not just an exercise of style over substance. I particularly like these crystal touches on the door switches and the central iDrive controller, but it doesn't sacrifice anything in the way of functionality. The driving position is excellent, visibility is good all round. I love the huge digital screens, both one for the driver and the central touchscreen here. But this car gets air suspension all round, and for me that's kind of solved a bit of the twitchiness of the 50. You've still got plenty of feedback from the steering, really good throttle modulation, a confidence and grip to the chassis which is really excellent. But when you get away from more suburban roads and out onto these lovely open German roads, you can really get a chance to try the performance out. And it is absolutely remarkable. It's going to take some getting used to that. But what I love is it's accompanied by its own unique sound. Just like the other versions, it was designed by composer Hans Zimmer, but this car has been designed to have its own specific sound to separate it from all the sub-M versions. Performance in this thing is pretty impressive, but just as impressive is its range. On a single charge, the M60 will go, BMW says, 566 kilometers or thereabouts. Now that, you'd have to be honest, for a majority of your duties in a car like this is more than adequate. It certainly would be for me. The thing that surprised me about this car is how accessible that performance is. It's got a sure-footedness that means I'm sure it would do it just as confidently and capably in the wet, on unsealed surfaces, some of Australia's dodgy roads. And if you can find a road straight enough, the M60 has a higher top speed. It'll do 250 kilometers an hour versus the 200 that the other variants are limited to. Regen braking isn't quite as aggressive as some other EVs, but in this car, it's got an interesting approach to regen. If it sees a speed limit sign coming into a village, it will increase regen to help you slow down for the speed limit zone. But then when you're out on the road, it'll just cruise as a normal car would if you take your foot off the throttle. It took me a little while to get used to it, but it's little features like that throughout this car that just keep delighting me as I drive it. Whether this car makes sense or not comes down to its price. In Australia, $222,900. It's a lot of car, but it's a lot of cash. Buying into the M Sport family is probably one of the most expensive ways you could do it, but you do get so much for your money. Up until now, I've been driving in just personal mode, which is not quite as personal as it sounds, but when you get out onto some of these more open roads, then you can go into My Modes, pick Sport, and suddenly the M60 becomes even more aggressive. Wow. Now, I've got all-wheel drive in this car, but even on perfectly surfaced roads like these, in the dry, on a perfect summer's day, I can feel those motors and individual wheels scrabbling for grip. It's got way more character than I was expecting, and that for me is the difference between this and the other versions. This feels a little bit more M Sporty. And all the time accompanied by that weirdly lovable sound. But for me, it's still lacking some of the hardcore M Sport nature and character. There's certainly tons of capability and ability, but I don't know, I think I'm waiting for the full-blown XM. And that for me is really what's so exciting about this car. It's a step along the way, a very exciting step. This car has got amazing performance, styling to match, tons of equipment level, but it's not a full-blown M car yet. Around the corner is the XM, the first M-powered version of an electric vehicle. But beyond that, you have to think about conceptual cars like the Vision M Next, that coupe that invokes some spirit of the original M1, and that's the car that gets me really excited. But until then, we've got cars like this to keep me very happy indeed.